Hey guys, Rio here, and welcome back to another hashtag daily tutorial here on TGod Designs. Today I'm going to be going over something near and dear to my heart, as many of you probably already know. I'm going to be going over expressions, and I'm going to make it just really easy to understand. This is going to be aimed for people who have either not really worked much in After Effects and have not or do not know anything about code at all. So my aim is to pretty much cater this to anyone, and hopefully the aim is to get you guys in love with using expressions as much as I am. So that's the aim. Whether or not it works, that's up to you guys. So thank you so much for tuning in to this daily tutorial here. So I guess we should just get right into it. This is going to be really entry level, this first episode, but I think it's really important, especially to make sure that we're all caught up to speed. So this is just really rudimentary stuff. So first off, what are expressions? Expressions are basically just bits of code that you can put into After Effects that it'll assign, that'll use this code to assign values to properties such as position, opacity, etc. So as per example, I'll just make a main comp right here, and I'll just keep it the traditional 1920 by 1080, and the duration doesn't really matter all that much. So expressions basically assign value. So what does it mean to assign a value? So let me just create a square here. Let me bring up my guides here, and I forgot to turn off my stroke width there, but that's a square just as much as any other. So that's a square, right? So let's apply a quick expression to the size. Now the size is let's make it 500. So right there we're assigning a value to the property of size. That's one way of doing it, using this and using keyframes, right? That's how most people assign values to properties in After Effects. However, expressions are just an alternative way of assigning values to properties. So I'm going to alt-click on the stopwatch, and that's going to bring up our expression dialog here. And it's really simple. All you have to do is look over here and say, size has two values in one. So in order to do that, we just gotta create a bracketed entity, and then I just type in a value. So 200, 200. So instead of being a size of 500 by 500, we're assigning a new value to it using expressions. Go ahead and click return on my number pad, or click out, and as you can see, our square is now 200 by 200 instead of the 500 by 500. And you can go ahead and disable this expression by clicking the equal sign right here and disabling it. And you see it pops back to its original position set by the user. It's no longer reading the code of the expression, so it's releasing the 200 by 200 statement and just defaulting back to what it was before. And you can re-enable it, and it's going to look to this expression for value instead of the two sliders right here. So basically, expressions are just a way of not taking the value that you assign right here and using a little bit of code instead. And the great part is that this is based off JavaScript, and JavaScript is really easy to learn. So that's the essence of what expressions are, I guess you would say. Expressions can either replace keyframes. So as you can see, when I have this, I'm going to enable this expression, so the size is going to be 200 by 200. And you'll see that no matter how many keyframes I make at different values, like 500, it's going to pop right back to that 200. Because in this instance, instead of modifying keyframes, we're replacing the keyframes, because we're not doing any operation on the keyframes with our code. It's just giving it a direct number, and it will always be 200 by 200 for always, forever, because it's reading the code and it's disregarding the keyframes unless we incorporate the keyframes in our code. So expressions can either replace keyframes, which it's doing in this case, or it can modify keyframes. Let me show you an example of modifying keyframes. So I'll just do value, which is the current value of the property as put in by the user, and I'm just going to divide it by 2. And as you can see, our keyframe, our first keyframe is 500 by 500, but it's being modified by the expression down here, which is value divided by 2. Therefore, the result of our property is 250. So even though our keyframe has a value of 500, the expression still modifies it. And as we go over here to this keyframe, which has a value of 556, that value is being fed into, this value right here is being fed into the expression, and it's doing an operation on it, which is basically dividing it by 2, and our output is 278.0. And you could do this by hand without expressions. You could just calculate it in your head and say 500 divided by 2 is 250, or 250, and you could do it by head. But expressions are a way of streamlining that process, and it gets so much more advanced than this. Oops, sorry. It gets so much more advanced than this, but that is in essence what keyframes can do. So they either replace or modify the keyframe values. So when do we use them? I kind of went into that a little bit already, but you would use them for, first off, for tasks tedious to do by hand. So as you saw, it would be tedious to go through each keyframe and divide them by 2 mentally, or just having to type it in. So expressions are a good way of doing this. We still have all of our animation, it's just everything's being divided by 2, and of course this can change. So if I wanted, I could times everything by 2, and of course instant change, and our square is twice as big now instead of half as big. And I can just set it back to its original value, and that's basically just a feedback expression, meaning the expression isn't really modifying anything, but the expression still is taking precedence over the keyframes. It's not reading the keyframes per se, it's reading the expression, but the expression is just referencing the keyframes. So there you go. So first off, you would just use it for tasks tedious to do by hand. Another example of something tedious to do by hand is, say we wanted to rotate every copy of this layer by 45 degrees. All you'd have to do is go down to transform, and then go to rotation, alt click it to bring up your expressions parameter, and just type in index, which is referencing the little number next to the layer name, and then you'll put in a star for multiplication, 45. So each new copy of this layer will be rotated by 45 degrees. As you can see, you don't see anything after that because they're just putting on top of each other. But that would be an example of something tedious to do by hand. Let me change this by 12.5 degrees so you guys can see what's going on. So each copy is being rotated by 12.5 degrees. And that is another example of something tedious to do by hand that is better suited for the use of an expression. And I just alt-click the rotation again to get rid of the expression. So that is another reason, or another time you would use expressions. Oops, sorry, I went one too ahead there. For rigging and triggering automatic changes to properties based on other criteria. Now that's a handful of a sentence. Basically, what I'm trying to get across here is that what you can do is basically change, let's say, the size based on something else. So what we could do is link our size to our position for whatever reason. And as we change our position, the size changes too. I don't know why you'd want to do this, but that's just an example of rigging, triggering automatic changes to, in this case, the size based on our position. and you can link any two properties together. You just have to know how to word it so that After Effects understands what you're trying to do. And then for just weird people obsessed with efficiency and not wasting time, like myself. I don't know why, but I'm absolutely obsessed with doing things in a manner that is more than 100% efficient, even if that means wasting time up front. I don't know why, it's just the way I am. An example of this would be creating expressions to automatically create a parallax effect, which I've created a user preset for. So a parallax, I call it parallax parent, and basically it just adds a null object that you can parent stuff to, and that will automatically have a parallax effect given to it. So it's just expressions are a good way of automating processes in animation and Adobe After Effects. And then the last one is just for use of functions such as the random function in expressions and math operators. So I already showed you a little bit of math operators, of course, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division of values and other stuff. And you can also add random motion or random values. So if I alt-click on here to add another expression, basically what I can do is say random, and then I just assign two values that I want the output to be randomized between. So I want it to go any random value between 0, 0, which is 0 height, 0 width, anywhere between there and, let's say, 500, 500. So that's going to just pick a random size between 0, 0 and 500, 500. Go ahead and click out or enter on my number pad. And as you can see, it assigned a random value, which in this case is, oops, let me just zoom in here, which in this case is 350.2 by 404.5. So yeah, and I think every new frame, yeah, because I didn't specify a seed for this random, every new frame is going to be a different random size. So it's stuff like that that's really hard to it's really hard to simulate organically by hand in After Effects. You would have to try really hard to make each new frame a random size, but as you can see here, After Effects is just doing it for us. Of course, not 100% useful function, but it is very useful when you know how to use this and you can manipulate it in other ways rather than just spitting out the output being random. All right, and let's get to writing your first expression. I know I've kind of showed some examples along the way, but I want to kind of dig into the anatomy of what an expression is, just very basic in basic terms. So expressions are based on JavaScript, which is an object-based language, and it's also very, very easy to learn, which is great because I know probably a lot of people working with After Effects aren't necessarily from a background of coding. So let's go ahead and break down the anatomy. So I'm going to get rid of our expression here by just clearing everything and clicking out or pressing return on my number pad. And I'm going to go over to this new tab in Sublime Text, and I have my language set to JavaScript, so it's going to do some syntax highlighting for us, which is very helpful. I recommend, if you're going to be creating anything with expressions, you download Sublime Text and write out your expression in Sublime Text first before pasting it into Adobe After Effects, because it does have useful features such as syntax highlighting. That will make it easier for you to read the expressions while you're writing them, and then you can later copy paste them into the expressions field on Adobe After Effects. So let's go over the anatomy of what an expression is. So expressions are object-based, meaning you have to specify an object first, and then you can either set it equal to a value, or you can do conditional evaluation with it, which I'll get into a little bit. That's a little bit more advanced. But for basic purposes, what we can do here is just say we can create variables as well. So let's say we wanted to create a new variable called size, and size is equal to 5. Now, any other place that we want to reference size, all we have to do is just type in the name of the variable instead of typing in 5. So right now you're probably asking, why do we even need variables? And that's a very good question. You don't always need variables. My general rule is if I'm going to be using a number or a value more than once, and I'm going to be referencing it more than once, I usually create a variable for it. So I'm going to create a new variable called height. This is a very basic example for expressions that I use all the time. So variable h for height equals 500. And then you end off with a semicolon. And I'm going to create a variable for width, which equals, let's do 300 this time. And then expressions need an output. Right now we're just declaring variables. These aren't outputs. These are just telling anything below that we can use h and w, and it'll substitute in these values for whenever I type w, it's going to substitute in the value of 300. Whenever I type in h, it's going to substitute in the value of 500. So we need to give an output, otherwise it'll just give us an error saying, well, you typed in some code, but we don't know what to do because you didn't give us an output. So I'm going to type in an output, which is height, comma, width. Or in this case, the width always comes first. X and Y pairs, the X will always come first, and in height and width pairs, width will always come first. Width, comma, height. And I'm putting them between brackets because size is a property that takes 2 inputs instead of just, for example, roundness, which only takes 1 parameter. For roundness, you would only type in one of these values because it doesn't take what's called an array, which is two or more values between brackets. So I'm just going to type in width, comma, height here. And as you can see, I'm going to close that off and end it with a semicolon. I'm going to go ahead and copy this and bring it into our expression here. I'll click on the stopwatch and paste that in. And as you can see, our size changes to the output of the expression, which we expect to be w, comma, h, w being 300. So our width is 300 and our height being 500. And as you can see, our height is 500. So that's the basis of the anatomy of expressions and or JavaScript. You can create variables and you can relay them back in your output, and you can also do operations on these variables. So I want to say let's say variable h. So we're redeclaring the variable of h. You can assign it to something completely different, like 200. And since it comes after this initial declaration of h, it reads from the top bottom. So this is going to be replacing the value of 500 we initially assigned to h. It'll just reassign it back to, or it'll reassign it to the new value of 200 because it comes after. It'll take precedence. And as you can see, our height is now 200 instead of 500. But we can also feed in the old value of the variable in here. So we can do our new h equals the h that it was before, 500, divided by 2. And there you go. What we can also do is feed in parameters from other parts of our project. So for example, what I can do here is assign our variable h to, let me get rid of this modification of our previous variable here. So what I can do is say I want the height to be, ooh, I've got a good idea for an example. Okay, so let's go ahead and create some text here. I'm going to name it just text, right? And I'm going to bring the size down just a tad. And I'm just going to get it probably around this big right here. So let's say we wanted the rectangle in the background to be the exact same size, height, and width of our text. We can do that dynamically. So let me just center the anchor point and use the align panel to get our text aligned to the center. So let's click back into our shape layer here, and let's go to our rectangle path. And what we can do is create an expression that gets the height and width of our text and then just spits it out as the output for our size. So in order to do that, I'm just going to write it in the expression dialog because I think it'll serve the same purpose. I'll do it in here. I'll be consistent with what I'm teaching here. So what we want to do first is we want to grab the height and width of our text. So our height of our text is going to be, we always start out with the topmost level. Excuse me. So we always start off with the topmost level, which is our composition. So we have to specify in what composition, because we're trying to target our text here. So starting with the composition, we need to find our way and point the expression to our text. So we want to say this comp, which is going to reference the comp that the expression's in. So we're pasting the expression on the size parameter, which is in main comp. So we're just referencing the comp that we're in, which will work. What we could also do is say comp. We could also say comp, and then between these two parentheses, we can put quotations and then say main comp, and that will do the same thing. It'll select main comp. But since we're in the same composition, I will just do this comp, which is just plain and simple, this comp. Doesn't matter what the name is, it'll always select the composition that the expression is pasted into. And then we need to specify the next level, which is not a composition, but rather a layer. So we got to do layer, and what layer are we targeting? Well, we're getting the height and width of our text here. So what we have to do is say layer, and then in parentheses, 2 quotation marks, and then the name of the layer that we want to select. So text, text 1 rather. And this is case sensitive. Everything is case sensitive. JavaScript is a case sensitive language. So you can't do this comp. You have to do this comp with a capital C. And you can't do layer with a capital L. You have to do layer with the lowercase l. Everything in JavaScript uses camel case, meaning that the first letter, or the first word rather, is always lowercase, and then the start of the next word, even though there's no space, is as uppercase. So what we're doing here is we're saying this comp.layer text1, so we've successfully selected the layer. Now all we have to do is extract the height and width of this layer. So there's a function for that, and I'm just going to give it to you, but if you don't know about any of the JavaScript functions, when you are editing an expression, you can view all of the JavaScript functions by coming here to the arrow and then going through all of these different submenus. And these are all the different functions that you can utilize in your expressions. So there's some math here, there's some color conversion. You can convert RGB to hue, saturation, and lightness. You can get the height and width of your footage. We're not going to use that, and I'll get into that later, but we're going to be using a different function called, let me get out of there, and I'll disable this expression. So I'm just going to give you the function, but it would be source rect for rectangle at time, in parentheses, the current time, and then dot height. And that's, we're going to end off with semicolon, and that's going to give us the height of our text1 layer. And then all we have to do is do it again for width. So I'm going to go fast this time. So this comp dot layer, in parentheses, text1, we're selecting our layer, dot source, or source rect at time dot width. And there you go. If you want to get nitpicky, I did write this twice. You could assign this to a variable. So for demonstrations, I'll do that. So, I forgot to write var before our variables here to declare them. And then I'm going to go back up to the top, and usually when I see something written more than twice, that's a big red flag in my head to go ahead and make that a variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this right here and say variable text source rect equals this. And now we won't have to write things twice. I'll just replace this guy with text source rect. That way we're not repeating anything. And case matters, and there you go. So now we have variables that give us the height and width of our text, and now all we have to do is spit them back out as our output, because right now we don't have any output. It'll throw us an error if we paste it in After Effects. So all we have to do is do width comma height, because width always comes first. And there we go. So now if I copy this and put it into our size, I'll click the stopwatch to bring up our expression, paste it in. We'll now see that when I zoom out, when I zoom out, our rectangle is the exact same size as the text. And you say, well, we could have just resized it manually. What was the point of that expression? Well, now when you change the contents of your text, the rectangle automatically updates to fit. And this is really useful for templating and rigging, as well as just if you're really paranoid like me and you just want things to be adaptable and as optimized as possible, you can just do that. So that's that. Now, what you can also do is use some math operators to add some padding around the edges of this. So if I go back here and I do the height is equal to source rect dot height, and let's just add let's say 15 pixels in this case to the height, and then 15 to the width. And that's basically just going to add 15 to whatever the height and width of the text is. So if I go ahead and copy this and paste it in and replace our old expression, what is it going to say? Text1 is missing or does not exist. Okay, very important. So when you change text, it automatically updates the name of the text. But we've selected, we're trying to grab the height and width of text1, but since we changed our text, text1 no longer exists. So what you can do is select layers by name, but you can also select them by their index. So in this case, the index of 1, which works, but if we create something and place that layer above this hey layer, so let's say we do that and we put it above, well, this will no longer select the right layer because the hey layer, our text layer, is now an index of 2. So what can we do? The way I would probably go about it is honestly just changing the name by pressing enter on our layer and renaming it to something static. And by renaming it, no matter what we set this to, this won't change because we've set it to a name that we specified, which was text. And After Effects says, okay, he's put in an actual name for this. We're not going to change it whenever the source text is changed. Okay, and let's just set this back to a name selector, and let's do text. So there you go, and you'll see that we have a little bit of padding around the edges of our text now. We have 15 pixels of padding. We're going to need a little bit more than that, I think. So I'm going to go ahead and add, let's say 50 pixels to the height and width there. Go ahead and copy this, and oop, I don't think I changed the name selector. So I'm going to change that, and now when we paste this in, we have a little bit more padding around our text. And as you can see, fully dynamic, really great, really awesome. And there you go. Now I'll get into some more advanced stuff in the next tutorial, but that's just a basic rundown of what expressions are, how to use them, and some just starting examples. It gets a lot deeper than this, but I do want to take it slow. So yeah, if you guys got lost at any part of this, I'd really like you to let me know where you got lost. It's really hard for me to understand how to relay and teach this because after so long of working with this, it just makes sense to me. So I want to know, like, if you're getting hung up on something, I want to know like where that is so I can explain it in more detail. But I think I did a pretty okay job of explaining my thought process throughout this. So I don't know, just let me know, give me a holler down in the comment section below if you need help on any part of this. I'm sure myself or someone else would be glad to help out. If this tutorial was perfect and you learned something, I would appreciate you guys leaving a like on this video. Basically just helps this video get to more people and help more people. And if you know anyone that works in Adobe After Effects that may benefit from watching this tutorial, go ahead and share the link of this video with them. You could just go up to the URL box, copy it, go to Discord, Skype, whatever, and share it with someone that you think may make use of it. So anyways, that's just a basic rundown of expressions. I'm not sure what I'll go over in the next episode, probably some conditional operators and more rigging stuff, because that's the part that fascinates me. I like the rigging aspect of expressions because I like making templates and making them just work. I think it's kind of cool. That's just me. So yeah, that's enough babbling. Thank you guys so much for watching this daily tutorial, and I'll see you tomorrow for another random design tutorial. I haven't decided what it is, but on Twitter, I'm sure you'll find out. Alright guys, take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.